pretty much the same submission requirements. But this program does have some distinctive features to it. So the proposals all have to be not submitted directly to USGS, but they go through the Water Center or Institute in your state or territory. It's also set up explicitly to create collaborations between university and federal researchers. And there's also some budget requirements with matching funds and things like that. So with all these distinctive features, a year ago, the NIWRRI organization is divided into various regions, and those of us, the centers and institutes in the Great Lakes region, put together a webinar for the prospective applicants to this program in our states to go over the program, talk about what it's like, and help folks perhaps find collaborators they were looking for. That turned out to be fairly successful. We got feedback on that. Quite a few people participated and found out, people told us it was useful to learn about the program. So this year, what we decided to do was to run that webinar again. It's the same group of states running that. And so I'll be introducing my colleagues here from some of the other Great Lakes institutes who are presenting. But since the information is the same for everybody, we decided, well, we could just open this up to everybody across the nation who might be interested and have this discussion here, give folks a chance to ask questions and also identify collaborators. So what we'll do here in terms of outline is I'll introduce my colleagues who will be speaking. They'll go through several slides to describe the program, each of the different RFPs and the priorities in there. We'll go through budget information and things like that. At the end of that presentation, we'll have 10 or 15 minutes or so for open Q&A. Anybody who happens to have a question, feel free to enter questions in the chat as we go along if you would like, and we'll get to those at the end. And then we'll use the balance of the hour for breakout rooms. So there's 8 breakout rooms in total. Each breakout room is labeled for a specific priority within one of the RFPs. So we'll be going through all of that. What we'll ask you to do is join whichever of those breakout rooms best matches your individual interest. And that'll be sort of an informal time for discussion. All folks with similar interests in the same space. We'll have moderators from around the NIWRRI network who will facilitate that conversation. Just give everybody a chance to introduce themselves, explain what their research interests are like, and perhaps take a step toward identifying collaborators on a potential project. So with that as background, let me now introduce my colleagues who'll be speaking to you. So I'll introduce them in the order you'll hear from them. Laura Essman is the Managing Director at the Indiana Water Resources Research Center. Then you'll hear from Tanya Williamson, who's the Acting Manager of the Water Resources Research Acts Program at USGS, and Amy Weckel, Assistant Director at the Illinois Water Resources Center. And before they start, I'll just note that this, you may have noticed already, this meeting is being recorded. So if you see something that's said here that you want to refer back to, both the recording and the slides that we'll be presenting will be distributed out across the water institutes across the nation. And they in turn can distribute it to individual researchers. Many of them I expect will post it on their websites. If you have any trouble tracking it down, I know we're going to post it on our website here at the Water Resources Center at the University of Minnesota. I think the other Great Lakes centers will do the same. So with that, I will turn it over to Laura.
Great. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here without having any difficulty. How we doing? Everybody see what they're supposed to see? Okay. Yep. All right. Well, that was a great introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. Some of this will probably be a little bit duplicative of what Jeff just said, but just to let you know what we're going to cover today. I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to NIWR, what that means, and the state water centers or institutes. Give you some information on who's eligible to apply for these funding opportunities and then how to apply. And then we'll go into specifics about each grant program, including their research priorities, because those are very important when you're applying. Give you an overview of the RFPs with an emphasis on the budget criteria, because the budget information is crucial in not delaying awards if you are awarded one of these. Go over some USGS collaboration opportunities and how to figure out who you can collaborate with. And then one thing I don't have on here is our Q&A, but we will allow some Q&A. And then that self-selecting breakout space that we can all talk about. So to lead us off, NIWR, you've already heard an acronym. If you don't know what it is, it's the National Institutes of Water Resources. And NIWR is made up of 54 water resources research institutes that were established under the authority of the Water Resources Research Act. Each of the 50 states, plus the District of Columbia, Virginia, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Guam, each have institutes, and those are housed at their land-grant university. And each institute receives an annual base funding through the U.S. Geological Survey to support competent research, to also train our future water scientists, and to disseminate research results to water managers and the public. We are separated into regions. Jeff mentioned that a little bit. And again, this webinar originated a year ago with the Great Lakes region, which were purple on this map. We felt that there was a need for more awareness of this funding opportunity. And one of these grant programs actually has a geographic limitation, and it sits right in our area. So we felt the need to help educate people on how to apply for this money. As far as eligibility, you, as an applicant, you need to be any investigator at an accredited institution of higher learning. So if you are a researcher at a university or college, you are allowed to apply. The key about this money is that those investigators have to work through their Water Resources Research Center or institute in your state for the application process. So a PI would not directly apply to these programs. Instead, all the information goes to your Water Resources Research Center or institute. And then as an institute, we actually apply for you. If you don't know what your institute is or the contact information, this QR code will take you to the USGS information page on this program. And there's actually a United States map and territory map, and a pull down menu for each. And that will get you hopefully to the correct person. USGS is pretty good about keeping that updated. We've had a lot of turnover with directors in the past year with retirements, but we've checked a few of them and they're currently updated. So again, I cannot reiterate this enough. You must work through your state contact at your Water Resources Research Institute. Again, we put this QR code so that you can continue to follow it. In the Great Lakes, which is where this webinar originated, we wrote who your contact information is. And I think we'll be providing you information online with the slides that will give you contact information for our institute contacts. Other institutes, again, go to the QR code and figure out who that is. And if you have any questions, of course, you can ask us. Application requirements may differ for each state, and this is super important because we do have a deadline from USGS that we are required to submit your application. But to prepare for that, many states do various pre-deadlines. So there might be deadlines for a notice of intent or a different deadline for budget materials. The deadline that you will have to get your materials to a Water Resource Research Institute will be before the final deadline, of course, because we need to work with our sponsored programs folks. Also, there are many states that publish submission guidance documents, so make sure you check those out. As far as a timeline for this funding opportunity, the USGS did release the 3 RFPs for these programs on February 23rd. And we anticipate that most proposal submission deadlines to Water Resource Research Institutes will be around early to mid-April, because the final deadline for us as an institute to submit your proposals to grants.gov is April 27th. So again, we will need some time to work with your proposal to make sure that it's complete and make sure that our sponsored programs has gone through your budget to make sure it's complete. USGS anticipates announcing funding decisions in September, and they also anticipate that any funded projects will begin January 1st. But there are always delays that are possible, so that could be a little bit later. And again, as I've said before, each state will have independent deadlines, so please pay attention to those. Again, some will require notice of intent, some will require a separate submission of budgets and budget justifications. So please check out your individual state requirements. With that, I'm going to pass the baton to Tanya Williamson, and she's going to go over the 3 programs and their priorities.
Thank you, Laura. So there are 3 separate RFPs that each have a set of specific priorities that go with them. 104G General is the longest. It's basically been part of the program since the program began, but starting in several years ago, about 2019, aquatic invasive species began an RFP, and then more recently, PFAS began an RFP. And so depending on what your area is of interest, you're going to have a separate document that's going to describe the process. The process itself, though, is very similar. Well, it is basically the same for all of them. The only difference among them is whether or not there is a paid or within USGS funded USGS collaboration, and that only applies to the 104G General. All 3, I'll say all of that again, but I just want to kind of say it a couple times to make sure. All 3 programs focus on water problems and issues of regional or interstate nature. So you want to be sure that you're looking at something that is applicable beyond an individual state and that can really be used nationwide if possible. And concerns related to specific program priorities are identified within each RFP. Those are specific. So although the general question described by the program itself has a little bit more flexibility, please pay attention to the specific priorities for the year. Okay, thanks, Laura. Next, thank you. Okay, some common objectives. The goals of the Water Resources Research Act, and specifically the competitive proposals, are to promote the dissemination and application of the results of research that are funded under this, both to the scientific community and to the general public. And we also have a large goal of assisting in the training of scientists in relevant water resource fields. So keep in mind that there is going to be, we're going to want to make sure that we can see how early career faculty, how graduate students are included in the proposal and the work plan. Okay, go ahead. So additional general objective for the 104G is to really promote that USGS collaboration with university scientists. And so your collaborative proposal will have a standalone section, if you're doing the general program, that enables the USGS collaborator to provide a work plan, a budget, and exactly how they fit into the larger proposal. All of that is beyond the page limits of the rest of the proposal. Each of the proposal groups, PFAS, aquatic invasive species, and the general, all hinge on USGS collaboration, but the AIS and PFAS have this model where the USGS collaborator is going to be doing parallel work that was already funded, while the 104G general allows for a little bit more flexibility with that. So it is anticipated, again, that for fiscal year 2023 proposals that USGS will be able to supply internal funds specifically for the 104G general collaborators. But again, they have to provide a work plan, a budget, and a general statement. Go ahead, please. And there is an example in the 104G general RFP attachment 3 that actually shows examples of what are expected from the USGS collaborators. That's new this year. So the first priority for the 104G general is a national scale evaluation of water budget, either retrospective or predictive, with an emphasis on CONUS 404 hydroclimate forcing data sets. So that the CONUS 404 was developed in the USGS NCAR collaboration. It specifically looks at topographic effects, for example, on those driving forces, precipitation, et cetera. So additional guidance includes emphasis on prediction of water budget components through a variety of interpretive approaches, incorporation of uncertainty in hydroclimate forcing and how that propagates through water budget components, and consideration of both retrospective and projected conditions. And the link is supplied in the RFP. And actually, this has been very recently released. And so I encourage you to take a look at it so you have a better understanding of what is included in the data set. Okay. The second general priority for 104G focuses on socioeconomics. And so the specific priority is to integrate ongoing USGS research and data collection in order to assess socioeconomic and ecological vulnerability to compounding extreme events and develop adaptation measures. This proposed project should undertake new research. And one example you could look at is the Water Use and Social and Economic Drivers Program that is provided, a link for which is provided in the RFP, to understand the vulnerability of urban, agricultural, and ecological water use sectors to both drought and compounding hazards such as wildfire. And those are examples of what might be considered urban, agricultural, and ecological, but you know, that's not a limitation. You just need to make sure you're looking at vulnerability of those environments. Additional guidance includes providing a quantifiable portfolio of risk for water use sectors, and then also developing climate futures and planning scenarios for relevant institutions so that basically these estimates can be, you know, used immediately by management, communities, and other institutions. Okay, next. The next program is the aquatic invasive species, and we provided a map in case you're not sure which states are included in the Upper Mississippi River Basin. So the aquatic invasive species RFP proposals must directly address aquatic invasive species that are an issue within the Upper Mississippi River Basin. Go ahead. Thanks. So the aquatic invasive species priorities look at effects, characteristics, and managements. And so effects are research that improves understanding on the effects of aquatic invasive species on lakes, rivers, and associated tributaries, again, in only the Upper Mississippi River Basin, including changes to water quantity, water quality, and ecosystem dynamics. Characteristics include physical, biological, and chemical characteristics of water bodies that infer resistance and resilience to the distribution, establishment, and effects of AIS in the Upper Mississippi River Basin. And specifically, research is needed to better understand these interactions in order to guide management decisions to improve invasive species management and result in positive effects on aquatic ecosystems. And then management is research on assessment of detection, spread, and management of aquatic invasive species, socially that are related to human dimensions, both socially and economically. But please note that this does not include physical control of AIS. So we are not looking for proposals that focus on developing new physical control mechanisms. Okay. I would say if you have, I see that there's a question about the CONUS 404. Thank you, Jeff, for putting that in the link. I would say reach out to the authors if what is included in the metadata and the science-based release is not sufficient. I'm not right now, you can send me that question. I can also forward it on to the authors. I'm not sure what preprint to send you to yet. That's a good question. Okay, PFAS. The additional PFAS RFP is looking at water quality, as well as the social and economic implications that might drive or be affected by PFAS. And again, the goal here is integration with ongoing USGS science. And so a recent PFAS publication, which kind of summarized USGS's approach, is this Circular 1490. Go ahead, please. So the first PFAS specific priority is looking for new media specific methods. So enhanced methods for detection on specific media with clear indication of newer different compounds, newer different methodological approaches, and lower detection limits that address specifically, for example, EPA's guidelines for different PFAS substrates. So media of interest include, and this isn't ranked order, but so all of these are of interest: tissues and plasma, sediment, air interfaces, and water. So go ahead. The other two, the first one is one on atmospheric sources specifically, in order to understand a little bit more about the atmospheric exchange in PFAS distribution and fate. And this may include methods, which may link to the previous specific priority, but really is looking at methods to determine transport of PFAS to the atmosphere and then to subsequent receiving waters. So that's different than the detection of the previous specific priority. So such new water method may help determine new compounds based on their likelihood to occur in the atmosphere. And then the final specific priority for PFAS is looking at process-oriented research at a molecular level. And so the key here is that it's not an inventory, but it is looking at molecular level, why different PFAS are going to accumulate and move through the environment differently. So process-oriented research on fate, transport, and effects, with emphasis on a molecular level understanding of PFAS precursor transformation, sorption dynamics, or mechanisms of bioaccumulation or biological and ecological effects. Okay, I think that's it. Obviously, all of those are in the RFP. Please take the time to read the RFP, read the specific priorities, and make sure that you're addressing those specific priorities. In terms of federal collaboration, and this is also outlined in each of the RFPs, collaboration with USGS or other federal scientists is encouraged, and it is strongly encouraged. In fact, in each of the rubrics, you'll see that there are actually point values for that type of integration. Federal employees may not be a PI, but they can be a co-PI. Obviously, all of the PIs need to be, as Laura said, a researcher at an institute of higher learning. Federal agencies may not receive funds from these grants. So even for the 104G General, where USGS staff may get funding in order to facilitate their collaboration, those are not WRRA funds. Those USGS staff are actually funded from a different set of federal funds. And so that's one reason why we need that specific work plan and budget, and we need it separate from the rest of the work plan and budget. Contact your WRI for assistance in identifying USGS collaborators, but I know at least a few people are here on the call today that might be able to help you find people. And if you don't find someone within the group today, Laura and Amy put a link here for other methods of connecting. There are some examples of people with whom you could connect in some of the RFPs, between the authors on the data releases, et cetera, some of the links that have been included. So hopefully you have a lot of resources there, but if you're still having trouble finding someone with whom to collaborate, reach out to your local water science center. That's another good place to start. And then you can always come back to me as well, but your local collaborators are always the best place to start. Okay. And I think I'm handing it back to Amy at this point. This is the group of USGS coordinators and water science center directors who were able to join us last year. I think that some of them are again within the group today, but these are some other examples of whom to talk to if you're from within the Great Lakes region. But again, this is just another example. If you're not within the Great Lakes region, These are just examples of potential contacts that you will have a local equivalent. I think that's it.
Okay, thanks, Tanya. That was very informative. So there are several budget criteria that are kind of special to these RFPs, and we encourage you to work closely with your business office and your Water Resources Research Institute in your state to make sure that you are meeting all the criteria as required in the RFP. For each of these, for the general funding opportunity, there will be up to you can request up to $310,000 in federal funds. And each of the AIS and the PFAS opportunities, you can request up to $279,000. And the project periods can be for up to 3 years, and budgets should be prepared in 12-month increments. Now the special part of the budget requirements, there is a 1-to-1 match requirement. So every federal dollar that you are requesting, you will have to bring a match of $1. And the match periods should be met each 12-month budget period. So if you're requesting a 3-year project, every year of that 3-year project, you have to have a 1-to-1 match commitment. The facilities and administrative costs, which are indirect costs at some institutions, it's a percentage that's added to the amount of federal funding that you're requesting. And it typically goes to your institution's overhead costs, basically lighting and building costs and things like that. Those cannot be paid from the federal funds. You cannot charge those as part of the federal funding request. Instead, you can claim the unrecovered F&A on both the federal and non-federal direct costs. So if you have a project and you're requesting, say, $300,000 for actually, I have an example on the next slide. Let's go to that. That'll be easier to see. So if you're requesting $310,000 in federal funding, say you're applying for the 104G general grant, and that's the total project cost over the 3 years. You can see that non-federal, that's typically the matching contribution on that is typically PI's effort that is contributed by the university. And so in this case, they are providing $90,500 in direct cost matching to contribute to the 1-to-1 ratio. But F&A on the federal portion, which would be 55% of the $310,000, which is $170,500, that can also be counted as match. So you don't have to provide exactly 310 to 310. Your university here is providing 90,000 instead of the full 310. And you can also, again, on the non-federal portion, these are the unrecovered costs on that portion. And that equals a total of 310,775. So you've met the match requirement overall. The percentage of F&A varies by institution. And so you'll want to double check, again, work closely with your business office and your Water Resource Research Institute contact to make sure you've got the right numbers and that your match is accurate. Special budget criteria. There are PIs can request salary from the federal funds. They don't have to use it as their match. If they don't want it, they can get their own effort supplemented. But it's limited to 2 months of salary per year. And then very important is the details in the budget justification. As you're writing these out, the funds requested need to be distinguished very clearly between the federal funds and the matching contribution. So if you have a PI whose salary is providing match contribution, you'll put that in a separate section of the budget justification. And Additionally, details, as many details as possible will help you, will help support your application more completely, and allow for faster funding allocation on the USGS end. They are specifically looking for details as in for example, you're maybe testing a certain number of samples and the testing kit has a certain sample capacity. So they want to know those details. They want to know what the kit is, if you've got that information. How many samples can be tested per kit and the number of tests you plan to do and the cost per test. Break it down as far and in as many details as possible. And also, if you have a subaward that you're proposing to go with your project, those need to provide the same level of detail as the main project. USGS does provide templates for these, and we encourage you to use them. Finally, here's some free advice that we have for making your proposal competitive based on years of experience of working with USGS and these types of opportunities. First, connect with other teams who are applying to the same RFP. That will make your proposal much more competitive, and especially regional collaborations are encouraged. And that's because there's very low chance of USGS funding two proposals that are similar. Differentiating proposals will improve everyone's chances. And if you include a section on diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice, those are typically usually compete better than some of the other proposals. Student involvement is also key. That is one of the Water Resource Research Act missions, is to train young water resource scientists and get them integrated into the field. So regionally or nationally important. This doesn't mean you need to spread people throughout the region, but that the research needs to be regionally relevant. And I think the last 2 points kind of go together. Make sure you read and review the criteria within the RFP. Every RFP or every proposal will go to peer review. And so you want to make sure that you are nailing the specific priorities that are stated in each RFP. And if you're more vague about what is specifically listed, there's a chance that it won't review as well as some others. I think that is all the slides. So Jeff, I'll turn it back to you. You are muted. Jeff.
You're muted.
There you
Sorry. Thank you. I was saying thank you, Amy, and thank you, Laura, and thank you, Tanya, for presenting. We have time now for Q&A. I see that there's actually been quite a few questions that have already been asked, I think most of which have actually been answered in the chat. So folks can feel free to add questions to the chat if they like, or if you would like to ask a question live, just raise your hand in the reactions area and we can call on you. I see that there's one question maybe that was up a ways in the chat that may not have been answered. Folks can correct me if I'm wrong and there is an answer in there, but somebody asked, can a federal government scientist who has an adjunct position at a university apply for this type of grant?
It is my understanding that the answer to that is no. You cannot, federal employees cannot apply for these funds. So that does not change that person would be a federal employee. I don't see that question, but
Yeah, it was up a ways there.
Oh, I do see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Find a co-PI that can be the PI for you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I suspect it wouldn't rule out collaborating with somebody else who is a university employee and becomes the PI, right?
Correct. But that federal government scientist still cannot get any salary funds from the WRRA budget.
Right.
And obviously federal funds cannot be used as match. It is part of the WRA program that federal funds cannot be used as match. So that is any other federal source that's must be excluded.
Yep. Thank you for that. I see another question here in the chat. Is the total amount of money available and the probable numbers of grants awarded? I think that information is it in the RFPs? I don't remember it off
It
the
is
top
in
of
the
my head. Maybe
RFP,
somebody
yes.
rattle it off.
It is in the RFP.
Yeah, there's as I recall, it's around 2 million for 104G, 1.5 for AIS.
I think at the maximum amount, I may be wrong, but as I recall, it's 5 AIS proposals at that amount that Amy showed, 10 PFAS proposals, and I think 6 104G general at that maximum amount.
Great.
But please look at the RFP.
Yep. Next question. Do they
Go
have,
ahead.
sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Next question is, do they have to be considered faculty in order to be a PI on a proposal? At least that I can answer, at least for at Minnesota, we have a specific group of faculty and staff who are PI eligible. So all tenure track faculty normally are PI eligible, but it also includes folks who have non-faculty research positions. Some postdocs are PI eligible. So I think that's an institution specific issue. Unless USGS has any additional blanket guidance on that.
No, what I can say is from the perspective of our budgets office, technically the award goes to the institute. And so that's why it's an institute decision, because technically we're not awarding to the PI. So it's less important at that level. Remember though, that the PI can only get 2 months of salary on the award per year. And so that may affect who ends up being the PI.
And if I may call you out to give you kudos, Sam Oliver, you put in a link to some research that's behind the CONUS 404 data set, so folks can. That was a good question that somebody asked. So there's a link right there you could refer to. Let's see. Next question. Under the priority 1, will a proposal cover all 3 guidelines, or 1 or 2 is enough?
And I wholeheartedly agree with Sarah's answer. Do not try to straddle all of the priorities. Really make sure you are addressing clearly one of the specific priorities. AIS is really the only one where there's much intermingle. And I've seen other proposals where someone tried, the proposal tried to cover too much. It's much better to be focused. It allows the peer review panel to better understand what you're trying to do and what is achievable given the amount of time and money.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for folks who are answering questions here. This is great.
Can we, I'm sorry, Jeff.
Laura,
can we share that budget example one more time, please? I have a question on that as well. I just want to go over it one more time.
I'm going to go to the question underneath while you guys are bringing that up. Can the award be split between 2 collaborating institutions? And one institution will be the lead institution. that lead institution has the lead PI or the PI, which means it has to go through that PI's state. It doesn't really matter where the collaborating institutions are, but they are all considered subawards, which is going to be relevant in the budget. But the budget templates have been set up so that there is a full detailed space for the subawards that then gets summarized into the institute's overall budget. But so that's how it's split up, but it doesn't matter if you're splitting between multiple institutions. What I'm sure I left something out of that answer, so please feel free to add.
Okay, I know I kind of, these budget requirements are very confusing if you're not used to them. And so I appreciate the extra questions. So for example, in a typical or a standard proposal that you're probably used to working with, the award cost, the total award cost or award amount of $310,000 would typically include F&A costs. So, but these kind of, this program does not allow you to charge F&A costs to the federal funds. So instead of receiving, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. So if, say, the total award cost of a standard proposal would be $300,000, but 55% of that would come off the top and go to your institution. In this case, you are allowed to request the entire $310,000, and what would be charged in this example, the 55%, can be used towards match instead. And that fits the match criteria, which is a special criteria of these proposals. I don't know if I've just created more confusion, but I don't know. Is there something I can add that would help? I would say just.
I think that was helpful, and what we always get questions about budgets when PIs are putting together their proposals, and I would encourage you to be in contact with your state institute, who are the folks there are used to these questions and can give you guidance on this. And much better to be in touch as you're doing it than figuring a bunch of stuff out and having to redo things at the end. So this is great. There's one additional question here, and we should get to breakouts here. Yeah, okay, so non-PI staff like lab managers can be included for more time. The 2-month limitation applies to PIs. Okay, so I am putting in a PDF document into the chat that you can hopefully open that summarizes all the different priority areas that were already talked about in the 3 different PIs. So you can take a look at that, and we have breakout rooms, which I'll open in just a second here for each of those priorities. So we'll have you select the breakout rooms and join the one that pertains most to you. So let me, before we have folks join breakout rooms, any final comments from the speakers? Any questions that we missed or should cover, you think?
And I'm just going to reiterate one more time. These are summaries that are on this form, correct? That you sent out. Please make sure that you read the RFP and the full details and the bullets. They were listed and I read through them, trying to make sure that I highlighted all points, but we just want to make sure that people actually read the specific priorities.
Right, that's a good point. This document is a summary, so we just get them all one page so you could see what they all were. But when you're developing your proposal, you definitely want to look at the complete description of the RFP. Okay, so I think the rooms should be open now. You should be able to find them in, are you seeing those in the breakout room section?
Yes.
If you don't know where that is, look at the bottom of your screen. You should see an option for breakout rooms. Click on that. It'll it'll open a list and you can click which one you want to join.